for ideas how to improve the state of forests in the EU. I think we've talked about policy today, legislation, also strategy development, so top-down policies. And we have talked about market-based mechanisms, and I would like to add a third dimension, which is bottom-up awareness raising among forest owners. This would, at least for the moment, exclude public forests, but would address the private forest owners, which are, for example, in Austria, as I've heard, 80% of owning 80% of the land. So I think this would make a lot of sense to get these people together. Everybody who's willing to share his experiences about more ecological forestry, and learn from each other, and also try to lobby for such more ecosystem sound approaches to forestry. And just mentioning, we have the Waldallianz Forest Alliance project that is running on the long term without lots of funding, but this is actually what we are trying to. We're trying to create a platform where people that are motivated to improve the state of conservation of their forests, where they can communicate, and then also turn to the public with that.
Great. Mary?
What was the question again? I think that to improve forests, we need less cutting, and to get less cutting, we need better advocacy. And to get better advocacy, we need scientists to be able to communicate clearly and simply and fearlessly about what's needing to happen, because the silo that scientists occupy and very jealously guard their academic elitism is really problematic, because as you saw here today, there's amazing research going on, and I'm not accusing anyone in this room of not being able to communicate, but in general, my experience with the science community is that they're not great communicators, and it's going to take real strong advocacy to push back on the forest industry, basically. We have to change that. So that's my idea.
Okay.
I strongly believe that if we really want, as European Union, to safeguard the remaining primary and old-growth forests, the only and best way is to implement a logging moratorium right now, because we already know where most of these potential forests exist. And as we could see today, there are many problems that endanger these forests, starting from basic mapping efforts through biomass efforts, politics, financial tools, and compensations, which are not so easy to get in many countries for protecting. But before solving all these other aspects, we will be still losing these forests, or while we will be solving these other aspects, we will be still losing them. So I think this moratorium on logging on these potential sites would be the way to really stop losing them, because we are still losing these sites. Like in the regions where I work, it's almost every day loss in some areas. I'm quite well informed, as we work in 10 countries and we have cooperation across all these countries, and these forests are still disappearing. So that's a real issue. And then other issue is the mapping of these forests. I was searching for some simple grants for some financial tools for just mapping these forests, because these forests will not map by themselves. Somebody needs to do it, but this is not the science. This is like more practically oriented work, and I didn't find any grant that could be suitable, that would directly finance these activities. So um, yeah, and of course there are many other things that needs to be done, but so as I said, I think we already know where potentially this forest exists. There are many studies that modeled potential distribution of these sites or at different scales, at national scales, at European scales. So first, establishing moratorium on these forests, uh, on these potential forests would be good. Then moratorium on logging. How to do it? Like, of course, this is a political decision, so it's on national levels. It's possible to stop planning logging activities in these potential areas. This is not yeah, and then of course there are the other activities. We need to physically go in the forests, map them, find financial tools and the ways how to protect this. But until all this is solved, we need to stop the possibilities to destroy these potential sites. So it's the first step.
Okay. I think there is a tool which is at hand, which is the courts of justice. European Court of Justice, for example, normally it's Natura 2000 area, or in many cases those old growth forests. If they aren't, then you can also take this case to the European Court of Justice, and many judgments of the Court of Justice have been in favor actually of conservation in the last decades. This has worked very well in Białowieża, for example. Augustin can tell hour-long stories about these successful cases that were made in front of the Court of Justice. So this would be at least one first step to take, I think. And funding for this, because you need to pay the lawyers, really important. You need to find the lawyers, but there's, for example, Client Earth, who has those contacts, and I think this is a very obvious next step to take.
We need to protect many forests in many places at the same time if we don't want to lose them. Białowieża was taken by the European Commission because it is an emblematic case, and we had a very good case there of logging that was happening, that was against specific provisions, not of the Habitats Directive, but the Plan of Conservation Tasks, that was saying exactly what could be done there and could not be done. And still, it took a long time to stop this. And I'm saying to stop this since the moment that the harvesters entered to the forest, it took a year, roughly 200,000 cubic meters of wood went out from there. And I think that it is like, if we do it like this, if we do it in a scattered way with litigation in every place, it is difficult. And what we have now in the policies are not binding policies. We have biodiversity strategy, we have a forest strategy, but we cannot, I doubt it, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think we can go to the European Commission. European Commission probably wouldn't even pick a complaint of this kind to just based on the biodiversity strategy and the forest strategy. I don't want to be pessimistic. I'm just saying that I think that it's a difficult thing. And when it comes to moratories, we have some experience now in Poland. There is also a colleague from Poland here. And we see what challenges we are facing. We were promised 20% of the forest excluded from logging by the government that we have now. 4 years, more or less. That's what we were thinking that it was going to take. Yeah, like they got they were elected for 4 years. Moratorium was introduced for 1.3% of the forest in Poland at the very beginning. And it's hard even to maintain this. We have to fight hard to maintain this moratorium because we have all the effects that are coming now. We have the wood processing industry, we have the forestry industry, we have the local governments that are not very happy about it. So I think to take not everywhere, yeah, like in some places they are happy, in other places they are not happy. What I really encourage everyone to do is to observe what is happening in Poland and learn from it, prepare in advance. Think about just transition of the areas where we want to protect the forest, because it will affect the forestry industry, it will affect the wood processing industry, it will affect many other stakeholders that I now cannot list. So think about it. Maybe it's payment for ecosystem services. Maybe these are other measures, but we have to think not only about the forest that we want to protect, but what happens if we protect them and what will be the backlash and how to neutralize it. Yeah, so that's just, I don't want to talk more because I could talk for an hour about it, but
I have a slightly different perspective, not totally, but slightly. And to answer your question first, like what needs to be done, I think we are missing a really important component here, because we're talking about, well, forests are part, and the state of the forests are part of existential threat that we are all facing as societies. And we talk about forest as if it wasn't a general public issue. It's scientists, forest owners, it's not general public in these discussions. And in my work, I found out that if you really talk to people and if you explain to them in lay terms how forests work and how you can prevent a forest from being logged, they actually become quite active. At least it was a thing in Poland. And this social mobilization was part of what has led to what Augustin has just mentioned. The fact is that we were promised 20% of forests free from logging, and something that we are now fighting for. So I believe that this is the component that for some reason is missing. Maybe it's because NGOs were discouraged by the fact that general population was not interested, or maybe environmentalists are slightly misanthropic. I don't know. I know that humans are considered to be a pest, which they are, but I think we need to also look at humans as part of the solution. And one more thing, I think in terms of looking at Polish moratorium, I think it's a great idea that has been really messed up, because so really it will be great to learn. It's now going on. Maybe we will be able to get more than 1.3% protected. Maybe we'll lose everything, but I think it's just a very messy public policy, which had a very good start and very good social mobilization, which I hope will be maintained, and maybe because of that we'll get more than 1.3. Sorry, I'm from Poland. When I say them, I mean foresters, which means state forests, probably.
Thank you. Very nice, thank you. There's a Spanish proverb. It says, before the truth put on her or his trousers, the lie has run once minimum around the world. And I think this is the same issue we have here with forests, with trees, with logging. The tree is logged, the forests are logged. What can we do? Yes, we can get justice, but it will take dozens of years till anything grows back, if at all. What I would demand is more rangers, more patrols in close to nature or protected forests, or even yet unprotected forests, like you mentioned, which are worth protecting. And I would like those rangers to be not local people, because corruption is really a topic. And I would like these rangers to have the mandate to stop logging immediately if they see something is going wrong. And I would like to have a fund on EU level, which then compensates the forestry owners if that decision of the rangers, if this blockade has been wrong. And then they can be financially compensated. And this could be a practice which could then take all over Europe place, and people would know their forests are safe. And I think they would treat them differently. Thank you.
I'm that lawyer that Mary was mentioning first. I'm going to tell you a little story. I mean, it's very short, basically. We were plaintiffs, we 2 Celsius, as an association. That it's not a natural person, right? It's a juridical person. So we basically created law at the court in Luxembourg for the simple reason that you mentioned that forests are supposed to be of public general interest, but they're not. In Europe, they're not. According to the judges in Luxembourg, they simply said that we, as an association, as an NGO, say it generally, are not prone or due to carry the public interest because we're not foresters, we're not, I don't know, mushroom pickers or whatever. So we couldn't possibly have a legitimate and direct interest in that forest. Not in that forest, in forests in general. Although we represent forests, we work with forests, but in terms of advocacy, of research, and so on. So in terms of jurisprudence at European level, Mary, you are right. We sue who and for what? Our case? 2018-ish it started, and well, at this point, this is what we have, and this is jurisprudence, which is law, okay? And well, we made it. I mean, from a negative perspective, but we made judicial history.
Yeah, I tried to sue the European Union in 2019 over the Renewable Energy Directive. And
No, it
we
was
got
2019, sorry, 2019.
we got a bunch of NGOs together that were European NGOs, and we tried to show that the representatives had direct and individual interest in those particular forests that were under threat for bioenergy. And
We're talking about the same thing, Mary.
Yeah.
We were
No, exactly. And oh, you're talking about that case?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about
No,
one
no,
that
no,
you
no,
did
no.
as 2
That's-
Celsius. Yeah,
Yeah, but 2 Celsius were plaintiffs.
right.
Yeah.
No, I know. That's
Yeah,
why I was
there
like,
you go.
I didn't
So-
know you did another case. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the case that we brought against the Renewable Energy Directive.
We've been into another case, but that's completely different.
Right. So, yeah, access, I mean, standing is a huge problem. And the courts, it's a really slow process. It does take years anyway, so.
But I didn't finish my argument. It goes on. It's a little bit. It is jurisprudence on one hand, and it's European law, litigation, which you couldn't get to for the simple reason, but you don't have standing. But then in another court case that we've been to, it was the climate case, people's climate case, 2 years in advance. It started and was just as long as this one. It was like 3 to 4 years it lasted. I mean, we waited for 2 years to tell us that, hey, you don't have standing. Okay, no problem. But at the same time, while we were fighting in court and we were being denied standing by the other party being the European Union, and the European Union is represented by the European Parliament and by the Council, at the same time, we were having so-called political meetings with MEPs. Well, MEPs are members of the European Parliament, and they were with us. We're meeting with, representatives of the member states, high level, for example, the Romanian presidency, it was back home, right? And they were with us, and we couldn't bloody figure it out. I mean, if MEPs are with us, and the vast majority, because we actually met from all the political spectrum, from socialists to radical fascists, and they were all pro-forestation, more or less, or pro, at the time, 55% decarbonization target, yeah, they were happy to talk to us, and we were all over the media and stuff, you know. However, politically they were with us, but say judicially we were being denied.
From your experience, is there any kind of a legal avenue to proceed as to move forward to improve the status of forests? In Europe?
At national level, probably. At European level, and
European level, no, but maybe national.
not really. I got another story. Can you wait for 2 more minutes for another story? It's not really forest related, but it's joy. I mean, I urge you to listen or think again about what Toby presented before. It's really important. And I used to work for WWF many years ago, like almost 15 years ago, on an investigation and research case on sturgeons in the Danube. So I was a student in moratoriums. It was plenty of moratoria on the Danube on how not to fish for sturgeons. Guess what happened after the big moratoria? They were fishing more for sturgeons. They were poaching like hell. So this is what you get out of moratoria usually. They stopped poaching them big time in the moment when many fish farms were being settled here and there, you know, especially in Romania and Bulgaria, and they were successful. And the preppies, the rich preppies in Germany, didn't care if their caviar was coming from a farm or was coming from the wild. They just didn't care about that. Okay. But now this is where the market actually helped out, but it took more than a decade.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, I just wanted to respond to you, and I will sound maybe very naive, but I'm actually a plaintiff in a court in a Polish case when regular people, Augustyn can tell you more about the fact that we cannot sue the forest management plans in Poland in administrative court. So this is what we couldn't do, but we went to a civil court, which is a kind of new way of suing, and on the grounds that some of the law was, in terms of nature protection law, was broken, but you can argue if it's really strong, but we are actually arguing on the ground of our, this is English legal language, but it's public goods, that our rights are being violated. And well, the case has not yet ended, but we were able, the court took the case and we were able to preserve a piece of land based on it. So, and it's now, some other places are thinking whether they can copy that. So I think it is a new way. And as long as people are able to notice that their welfare, their quality of their life really depends on these forests, and sometimes they're not the most valuable forests in terms of their biodiversity, but still they're forests. I think this is one of the ways.
I didn't mean we should establish this moratorium on logging in potential forests through courts. I just say that I believe this is a political decision. So if there is a target to protect all primary and old growth forests in the European Union, and we are still losing them because we cannot map them and provide financial tools and solve all the other socio-economic aspects, then this is the only way. But I believe this is a political decision. These forests are usually in very remote sites, not accessible. Often they are not economically very interesting. But of course, I don't know how to do it. But tomorrow here will be the member of EU Parliament, for example, Michal Vezik. We can ask also for his ideas.
What he will tell you is that you need to go with your co-authors and meet and lobby. You need to become a lobbyist. You do. And there's nothing wrong with that. You will be the most effective advocate for your own work. There's no person that you can hire that can possibly speak more effectively than you yourself. And you need to go have those meetings. You have to make that part of your, that's now part of your work.
Yeah, but call it advocacy, it's the good lobbying.
Right.
It's not dirty.
Good.
Yeah.
Let's recapture the word lobbying.
No problem.
Yeah. My impression is that we are too critical of courts and this and approaching courts, bringing cases to courts, be they European level or national level. I didn't suggest that as a wholesale solution to conservation of European forests, of course. But even colleagues of Augustin promote that in plenary talks on large conferences, and I think there is a lot to that. But of course, it's just one tool in the box. But I would insist actually that we have to make use of it.
Yeah, don't understand me wrong. I think that the litigation is a very efficient tool, but I think we have to think which tools fit what purposes. We need systemic changes, and in the most important cases, when there is imminent danger to very important forests, yes, we should go with litigation. But if we try to do it everywhere, then we just don't have enough resources, and we have less resources than people that want to extract. So I really think that we have to. Otherwise, it's like like a bucket, that has holes everywhere, and you are trying to do it with the finger. And using this metaphors also, or metaphoric language in general, I think that we have to think, as I said, we have to think about the drivers and what to create conditions that will be good for protecting the forest. So we have to think, for example, where to save the wood. Stop burning it. Stop making paper of it. Reuse it. Yeah, use it longer. So all of it, you said that we need to reduce harvest to have more carbon stored in the ecosystems, and this also has benefits for biodiversity. Yeah, but how to do it? Yeah, like what to do to need less wood, and then what to do with the people that for now were depending on processing this wood and extracting this wood. So that's what I'm saying. Using the metaphor, if we don't do this, you will push the balloon in one side and it will go somewhere else. No, you need to, take out the air from this balloon.
All of this is taking place in the context of EU policy that is relentlessly promoting the bioeconomy. And every single person who does anything even close to working on forests needs to push back on the idea that the bioeconomy should be an important part of climate mitigation. It's not going to work. It's zero sum. Like I said before, you can either store more carbon in forests and restore forests, or you can try and pump more carbon into products, but you don't get to do both. And there's only one that's going to actually restore forests and restore biodiversity as well as doing carbon storage. So until people start understanding this and explaining this to policymakers in a really clear and simple way, we're going to keep losing. Because every single policy right now is, this new Bauhaus bullshit, and excuse me, it's like on the tape, sorry. And the bioenergy, it all starts with B. Anyway, it's a bunch of BS. So, really, people have to just, after having worked several years now in Europe with European colleagues, there is a relatively small handful of people, and a couple of them are in this room, who are really unafraid about speaking out and saying the truth. But a lot of people, are very cautious, and they want to maintain their seat at the table, and they don't want to cause too much problems, and they want to continue to have access to policymakers. And really, we all have to become a lot more brave.
I also am very happy that a lot were discussed here, the potential financial or compensation schemes, because, of course, I also agree that we should protect the nature just because of the nature. But in the reality, we see that it's always a question of money. And I still don't understand how we actually are losing the potential of carbon accounting in forests for protecting these forests. Why the money for stored carbon in the forest don't go back into the forest? Why this cannot work? Because it seems this would be the most relevant tool nowadays, and there is only problem with the methods, that we still don't have proper methods to do proper accounting and to be based on real scenarios. So I see high potential that if the foresters would be paid for the carbon stored in their forest, I think the situation could change dramatically.
One word on the public discourse. I think, as understood, Augustin, he was going there. I think the public discourse is deeply wrong, and I see some promise in turning it around, so that we have a public pressure for a more cautious handling of the forest. The discourse, the public discourse in Germany, but in all of Europe and in the world, is wrong in the sense that it is always asked, yep, but how can we make forests provide us the wood that we need? Renzo Motta, he's not here anymore, so okay. I don't think it's unfair to take his remark as an example, which I really find really confused. He said, yeah, but if we don't use the wood from outgrowth forests in whatever way, then the wood will be imported from somewhere else where the standards are even lower.
I don't think he said old growth. I did not hear him say old growth. I'm gonna be the Renzo defender here.
Anyway, okay, accepted for the moment. Anyway, it's the wrong way of thinking. We have to first ask the forests what they can provide us. And this is the reference line. It's not what we need, but what the forests need. And if we have a number of what forests, of what wood volume in whatever situation forests will be able to provide us with, this year, in 10 years, in 30 years, we have to be really cautious. So not to be wrong, there has to be a margin of uncertainty considered and so on. Then we can start to think about how to use this wood. And I think it's a deeply wrong public discourse, and we really have to put lots of efforts to turning people's minds to the necessities of the forest ecosystems and away from our necessities.
I agree with you that we as European Union should be example actually for the developing countries and show that we can protect some of our forests, and that's the only way actually how we can show them that they don't end up as we did with 1 or 3% of primary old growth forest, because I think that's where they are going anyway. I like so-called triad approach, which is an approach how to plan the management of the forest landscapes. It was published by actually European Forest Institute, I think 2 years ago. It's a way how to combine actually non-intervention with closer to nature forest management and also with intensive forestry. And they suggest 30% of non-intervention, if I remember, 60% of closer to nature forest management, and 10% of intensive forestry to compensate for non-intervention. So there are ways to play with the management regimes in the landscape, and I think this is the way, because we really need to increase the proportion of strictly protected areas. We also really need to increase the areas with closer to nature forest management, but also we need the wood products. But I think everything is possible if we do proper landscape planning.
Not everything is possible. If we want to burn wood, if we want to burn, like warm our houses with wood, if we want to build cities out of round wood, no, we don't have the forest for that, and even less so with climate change.
I'm glad that no one is actually saying that the new law would be needed. That's good. Just not giving more role for the lawyers. But I think would be needed, and that's what we also try to argue here in Hungary. And I think on a European level, if you remember, there was one slide on the Forest Europe. I don't know who used it Forest Europe database that 30% of the forests are monoculture actually, something like that.
Yes.
I think the first thing should be that these tree plantations should not be considered as forest. Full stop. We just have to call them as they are, intensive tree monocultures, or like an intensive maize field or arable land. They are not, I mean, if you look at the Hungarian situation, I think Adam was presenting the table, Adam pointed earlier, he didn't even show the natural forest because they were, I mean, in Hungary, on paper, we have 2 million hectares of forest. 355 hectares, and not 1,000 hectares, 355 hectares is natural. And it, that's international, what is it, MZT data. So 355 hectares is natural, and only 20 or 21% is semi-natural. And we have black locust, a non-native species, covering 25% of our forest. A North American species, which are bloody, sorry for the word, Minister of Environment, considered as a Hungaricum. I mean, this is ridiculous. A North American species here in Hungary is considered as a uniqueness of Hungary just because we have it 25 years. It shouldn't be considered even a forest. It's a tree monoculture, tree plantation, tree farm, whatever. Or lignin, or cellulose farm, or I don't know, something like that. There are places where we harvest wheat, there are places where we harvest maize, there are places where we harvest lignin. That's it. I think that's the first, because then the argument of the forest sector, which they use, that there is no problem in, that's what we heard several times in the past 5 years, there is no problem with forests because since the Second World War, the territory of forest has increased in Europe. No, this is not true. The territory of forest didn't increase in Europe, I think. Or I would really like to see the figure that it's not only 3 monocultures. I think that's the first thing. Clarifying these bloody statistics.
I think it did increase, but on the expense of something else. You know, but the way how they always say forest land increases, you get the impression that the overall land in Europe is growing and getting larger, you know. But essentially they convert grassland, you know, or other actually usable land into forest because you get more money out of that. You know, the question that I have, I'm passing over to you in a second, is what is it? Is there anything that we could, for an example, focus on? Because one of the problems, I think, was apparent when Marco Onedo showed his diagram of all these different legislations that sort of somehow address forest, you know? I mean, it clearly is, you know, a collection of silos, yeah? So the question is sort of, where are the upper layers, you know? I mean, if you look at it as a hierarchy, where is it actually where we can focus on, where we can actually impact on several of those silos at the same time? You know, language is, for an example, certainly one aspect, you know, but, you know, changing language is an incredible task. You know, there are a lot of people need to be extremely consistent. The word sustainable, no, you're not talking about sustainable. You talk about sustained maximization of wood production. No, this is not a forest. That's actually a plantation. You know, this kind of language, or they tend to say decarbonization when they actually mean defossilization. They don't decarbonize if they just change one carbon source for the other carbon source. But that's actually a very complicated and long-winding process to sort of do that. But it certainly would be actually an interesting task to focus for all of us on.
Continue this discussion, which Zoltán said, that I think we have to turn to the general public, because we must them to understand what is the forest. In Hungary, 3 generations never see forest, just see a live wood stock. And once we start to do something for renovating the forest, we get some angry comments. What we are doing, why we are leaving there the wood, the valuable wood. So it means until the public won't understand what is the forest and what is the problem with this wood stock, what they can see, what they consider that is normal. And the forestry operation, what they consider this is the normal way to manage the forest. Nothing would change it. But if we can arrange that the public can understand what is the problem, how should be the forest looks like. We install some a wide camera in our area. And that's very attractive, and people can really start to understand that what's going there, that the forest is not just wood.
That I've been carrying around for a long time and nobody really picked it up. And that is, if you go in a forest to a place that you consider this is a wonderful, beautiful forest place, yeah, and you just notice the feelings that you have there, and then you go in a simple spruce plantation and you notice the feelings that you have there, you will see the total difference, yeah. The one side is an emptiness and the other one is sort of, like this sort of fulfillment, yeah. And I think if we can get people to just sort of listen to their feelings and do this kind of an experiment, then I think, they will understand what a forest is in comparison to a plantation more than if we come with ecological facts.
I come from Slovenia, the land when close to nature forestry has been working very well in economic and other ways for 200 years. So I think that one sort of like group of stakeholders that we haven't mentioned yet, but I think that are crucial in not only transforming European forests into forests that would be more resilient, but also satisfy this multifunctionality that we are asking of them, is the forest practitioners, education, and the culture that is connected to that. Because I mean, my family owns forests. We heat our houses with wood from our forests. So I feel like when you address people who have been living with forests for generations, they understand what, let's say, European Commission wants to achieve. Like, you want to leave something for the next generation. I feel like there is a big group of maybe more aggressive companies and industries who are trying to extract as much as possible in this lifetime. But on the other hand, these more rural areas of communities that know what forest should look like and have this sort of like sense of morale for them and responsibility towards the next generation, they kind of feel attacked because all of these policies are basically taking their livelihood away. So I feel like having this sort of like education both to the general public, to the people who live and work in forestry, of the fact that you can extract some roundwood out of forest, but maybe let's try to sell it for the highest possible price. People who are visiting forests should basically not necessarily pay for it, but maybe like payments for ecosystem services for sure are something that we should take into the consideration. Like having your vacation, if you are able to pay for an apartment in the Dolomites to admire these beautiful forests, well, beautiful, depends who you ask, but then there should be some sort of like benefit to the forest owner for providing these sort of like beautiful views and things like that. So I think that the culture here is really important, and there are many countries in Europe that have very strong forestry traditions, but I'm noticing that like education that Slovenian foresters are getting is completely different than education that like German or Finnish foresters are getting. There is a strong pressure from the industry that produces the machinery to operate in the forest. There is a strong pressure from very capital-intensive industries. And then on the other hand, you do have examples of good practices that actually are applicable Europe-wide, but we have to take into account biogeographic conditions. We have to take into account just what land can provide. You cannot implement the same forestry as we do have in Slovenia in the boreal forests in Scandinavia. And that's just the fact. Nature just works differently there. So for sure there are other solutions, but I think that if you educate young forest practitioners and the general sort of like public that works in this area in a way that they would be then able to decide what would be best in that particular location to reach certain goals that maybe, let's say, close to nature, forestry guidelines wants to sort of like implement.
Just for clarity, in Slovenia, the foresters face less pressure from the industry than in Germany?
Yeah, I mean, generally, based on, like, I work in forestry, but I studied international relations, so I'm one of those like hybrid people. But in general, the first of all, there is like 60% of Slovenia is covered by forests. 75% of forests are privately owned, and average size of a state is less than 3 hectares. So we have a huge amount of people that own forests, to the point where we are trying to motivate them to even do any silviculture at all. We do have pressure from like climate change, wind throws, ice storms, things like that. But in general, if you compare the prices that Slovenian forest owners get for their roundwood compared to, let's say, Finnish forest owners, Slovenians are selling roundwood at a much higher price because of this sort of like close to nature practice where both the forest owner and the district forester work together to sort of like maximize the profits with ensuring this multifunctionality. So Slovenians, as a tourist, for example, they are bored in Scandinavian countries because all you look at are forest plantations. On the other hand, we have forests and forestry is so good that we don't really realize it. This is why there isn't any Slovenian scientists here. But yeah, I think it could totally work. But we have to sort of like empower practitioners and trust them that they would do the right decision for their local situation, because it will be different from whoever owns the forest, what is the goal, what is the forest management plan. There is a variety of things that you have to take into account.
Yeah. We got some amazing forests around Kanska Gora area and so.
Yeah, well, if anybody's ever interested, I'm really happy to take your own.
I agree with you that we should draw on general public's attachment to forest and how it values forest, but I strongly disagree, probably with all of you here, that we should preach to people what forest is, because this is really a road to failure. If you go to people and you tell them you should think that this is a forest and this is not a forest, you are doing exactly the same thing that the foresters are doing. You're explaining to people how they should experience nature. And I think you are then killing the contact that you have with these people. Maybe I don't have a very full experience because from what I know, in Poland, we don't have pure plantations. But I think people are so deprived of nature at the moment that they can build a relationship with, I don't know, a piece of green grass in a city, and still it will be inspiring for them. So I think we should build on that without criticizing. And in my experience, no studies here that I have, but from hundreds of people I have worked with, once they start working with their everyday nature, they kind of build on an understanding, and then they will not only grow to appreciate biodiversity, but they will also learn about the ecosystem services and all the study biomass. They actually even read about biomass. So let's build on that rather than criticize people and tell them how they should feel about the world that's around them.
So how do you approach it?
I build on, and actually I don't even have to trigger it. It's somewhere there. I build on their attachment to their everyday nature that's around them, that they consider their forest. We actually have a map which is called Before Your Forest is Logged.
Yeah,
so it's...
But do you go out and meet them? You must be...
I don't have to.
Yeah.
So they come to me and they know that I exist, and they come to me and ask me, I feel that my forest, sometimes it's also about rivers or peatlands, is being endangered, what it is that I can do. And we also built an awareness that it's actually possible to do something and that you should be proactive. Okay. Because with forest, if you're not proactive, then it's actually you're done for.
Why do they know you?
Because I do media work.
Because you work in this organization and you do media work. And,
yeah, and...
a public figure in this way.
Yeah, so I kind of reach out with information, but the need is there. Yeah. So it's not that we build this need. The need is kind of natural, and then they come to us.
Thank you. Two remarks. One is on Slovenia and your culture there. So I've been in Slovenia several times, and I could say that that's just a paradise from forest management point of view. And I'm really surprised why this close to nature forest management is practiced only in some patches all across Europe. And of course, there is now a huge debate. It's a debate in a bubble on what is close to nature forest management and what it should be, even in Scandinavia and so on. But it goes very, very slowly. So I would say that a lot of how to say media work and pressure should be on to push forward this direction, this continuous cover forest management and these kind of types. But my remark would be on this triad concept and related to Martin. If we are talking about the primeval forests and old growth forests and the biomass problem at the same time, it's my impression that we mix two scales, because primeval forests are a very tiny portion of Europe, like less than 1%, and we are not saving them because of this wood demand and this biomass need. We just don't protect them because we don't know them enough. So I think these primeval and old growth forests should be treated separately and put advertising and how to say raising awareness separately to keep it as treats and other forestry issues are different, I guess. So we should go first on the biggest treats what we still have left.
I have a comment. I mean, I never really suggest that we have to tell people how they should feel or how they should understand. But we need to clarify the wording, because, I mean, would we call a maize field or a wheat an arable land as a grassland? Because that's basically what the foresters do, I think, with the poplar plantation. They call it forest. It's not really a forest because it doesn't function as a forest. It doesn't have all the elements which forest has. I think it's so simple. So I don't say that people should hate poplar plantation or, yeah, if they like it, that's okay. But let's call it as a poplar plantation or a cellulose farm, not a forest. Because then we mix up. If we mix up that, then we can again mix up wheat field with grassland as well. And this trick, I think the Hungarian government is doing with other stuff as well. So I don't want to get into real Hungarian issues, but battery factories, they are going to have a conference on that in November. Because there was such an outcry against battery factories here in Hungary, because we want to become the third largest battery producer of the world, then the government started to call some of them as green energy storage places. So, like, they are not producing battery, but they are producing green energy storage. That's how they call it in the how do you call it, application for permissions. This is a lie. It's the same lie as calling a black locust forest in Hungary, black locust plantation, a forest in Hungary. It's a lie. It's not a forest. It doesn't belong to Hungary. It's like, why would we call an eucalyptus plantation of Portugal a forest?
But I think the two things can go very well in parallel, because on the one side it's about changing our own language and sort of insisting on accuracy, yeah? And on the other side is I don't actually need to teach everybody, what a plantation or a forest is. The way how we talk with people is a different way sometimes how we sort of express ourselves. All our way how our media are and how we talk with decision makers and with policy makers, I think on that level it's absolutely okay to say, wait, it's not a forest, it's a plantation place, yeah? But to the general public, we don't need to sort of try to educate everybody.
That's the root of the problem. We speak differently.
Yeah.
We think differently on the water, on forests. I think that's the root problem.
I'm Sarah from Global Forest Watch. So just on that last point, I think aligning with the FAO definition of forest is probably the most simple way of going forward, but I totally agree with you that we need to better differentiate these forest types, and I think better mapping of forest types, which also align with emerging regulations like the EUDR, which require us to know where primary forests are, where naturally regenerating forests are, where planted forests, plantation forests, and I think we just don't know at the moment. There's no accepted map of those forest types, which is going to be required for the EUDR, which is potentially coming in a few months, or not if it's delayed. So I think better mapping of these different forest types is crucial, and I think that comes back to the presentations that I heard on. I heard old growth forests mentioned, and I know people mentioned that definitions vary across platforms, but I think at some point an agreed definition, an agreed map of where those forests are, what's an old growth forest, what's a primary forest. I think saying it's old is not really sufficient. We need to put some kind of time frame on that, and it's something that should be measurable. I think from my perspective, coming from the space data side, from space data, so that it can be monitored over time, regularly, that we can see changes that are happening to it. So I think that's probably key. And then just to pick up on another point, the fact that academia doesn't seem to have a voice in policy, and I agree with that point. I think it's actually a really good point. And I think although academia should stay neutral and present their data in a transparent and independent way, that their voice isn't heard in the current policy arena. And I know there's several Horizon projects focusing on forests at the moment that have grouped together. I think there's about 5 of them, and they meet regularly working on European forests. And I think that would be a good starting point for getting them to come up with a message. But I think they need to be kind of guided by people who are more involved in the policy process, because they're not following actively the debate and the timing, when is the opportune moment to come in with statements and that kind of thing. So I think there needs to be some support for those academics. I don't think, of course, their voice is the strongest voice, but their focus isn't on how to influence policy. Their focus is often on their research, as it should be. So there needs to be some support, and maybe this kind of organization, this statement which is coming out of this meeting, could be something they could at least contribute to, buy into, or use as some kind of leverage to putting their voice forward. So that's something that we can maybe think about after the meeting.
May I ask, what's the aim of this environment?
They have varying aims, but they're focused on supporting, I think most of them that I'm aware of are more the forest monitoring, so focused on understanding where forests are, how they're changing, how they're sequestering carbon and all kinds of things. So very diverse ones, how they can adapt to climate change, forest resilience and resilience in the climate, changing climates and so on. Some have very technical elements related to understanding forest ecology and dynamics, but I think there's certainly that policy relevance from what they're doing.
I have 2 remarks. One is about education, and the other is about Northern Europe and Slovenia. About education, I think that we certainly shouldn't tell people how they should feel, but people need to know basic facts. And I have no background in forestry or ecology. I'm a linguist and interpreter. And when I started my NGO 4 years ago, I had to learn a lot, like really from scratch, very basic things. And that's why I think I understand the average person perhaps quite a lot, because I'm not in the scientific bubble. And I think you need to know basic facts like that. Forest birds don't do their nesting in 1 week, as we can read sometimes in our media. Well, some statements by forestry sector, or that the spruce bark beetles, they don't nest in rotting dead trees which are on the ground. So things like that. And in our NGO, we have done hikes, which have been quite popular. Some of our hikes are like for decision makers only. So we even managed to take one of our ministers of environment for us to show him where the birds are nesting, like really explaining that some of them are in the moss and some of them in the canopy and all that. And we all have also had hikes for like public. We had 2 hikes on Monday, exactly a week ago then, right? We have, what weekdays today, by the way? Thursday, okay, yes, sorry. Yeah, exactly, this Monday, yeah. And these hikes were also highly successful. People were so happy that they got new knowledge. And so we were not telling them that what you thought was wrong or that you are somehow uneducated. We were just providing them knowledge. And I also think that we should change the curriculums of, starting in kindergarten up to universities. Many universities, I think all over the world, have these general subjects when you start to study. You get philosophy, sociology, well, these subjects no matter what you are studying. But we don't get ecology. And I think this is a big mistake, because also the decision makers, they might have a PhD in something, but when they really believe that forest birds do their nesting in 1 week and they take all kind of environmental decisions based on such kind of level of ecological knowledge, then it's really harmful. And now to Slovenia. Well, coming from Estonia, I feel really sorry that when we started with this commercial forestry in 1990s, after we regained independence, that we took Finland and Sweden as role models. So sorry for that. We didn't look towards Central Europe, and everything was done there. And when you look at the map, you see that Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, I think also Lithuania, that we are all nicely in the boreal area. But we are so different. The soil is so different. You can't drive these huge harvesters and forwarders on Estonian, like soft soil. We don't have these rocks like they do in Finland and Sweden. So this is just one of the examples. And when you take Finland and Sweden, they are very long countries, like stretching like really, really long distance from south to north. And the northern part, it's not comparable to our forests at all. So we should not copy them. But it is so entrenched in the mindset of our foresters and politicians that it's really hard, to move away from that mindset. And this has proven to be really harmful. And in Estonia, we also have a huge number of private forest owners, like in Slovenia. But the difference is that somehow the forest has changed ownership, so that the private forest owners are often companies, not private people. And I also own 15 hectares of forest, my family forest. And I get, although I'm blacklisted by the forestry sector because of my work as environmentalist, I still get phone calls every month asking whether I would like to sell my forest. And other people, like my relatives, they tell me that they get these phone calls every week. Can you imagine that the car dealership is calling you every month, asking you whether you would like to sell your car, or that the real estate agent is calling you? But that's what a reality in Estonia and Latvia since 1990s. And so when you say private forest owners and that we should trust them more, and so then it can work in some countries, but not in our region. So they have to really look who is the private owner. Is it like a small owner, forestry company? Is it a family forest, or some accumulated investment forest? So the picture is very interesting and fragmented.
Talking about like regionalization and the regional networks that we have to foster, to support. And one idea, docking onto the remark of the Slovenian colleague here in the second row, the Slovenian forest owners who are practicing continuous cover forestry. For them, I wouldn't say it's easy, but they are in a happy situation that they're in a social network of people doing quite the same. Yeah, so they are doing what everybody's doing. I'm exaggerating, simplifying right now, but there are many situations in Europe where there are forest owners that have the idea that what the standard forest owner around them is doing is wrong. They want to change behavior, but they don't have anybody to talk to. So I would like to renew my idea or mention it again, that it would be a good idea to create these crystallization cores all over Europe, like places or platforms where people that are seeking exchange of ideas and like mutual support, emotional support, and of course also technical knowledge from colleagues, where they can go in order to make progress with their progressive ideas of a different way of doing forestry in their region. So I have the idea, and in Germany, without any doubt, this is lacking. And I'm sure a Finnish forest owner who wants to do something different from the large rest of the forest owner also will find himself or herself really isolated.
Okay, just a question, because that actually, this came up a couple of times. Yeah? That one of the most important things is that we go out and talk about it. Yeah? And that means we talk to forest owners, but also on the other side to policymakers. What you mean is actually setting up sort of cultural meeting points where people sort of can go and talk. Like, for an example, this example from the Polish organization, whose name I can never pronounce, but it's Prahosnia or something like that. Okay, good. I have to practice in the evening. You know, I mean, but they seem to be operating like that, you know, so that's what you would actually suggest as one concrete idea. Okay, any more comments from the podium? No. I think, you know, I mean, like, we've started that discussion, and the discussion sort of will certainly continue. There's a number of different things that we've come up with, and I think one of the most important points actually is to just really go out and to talk with people and not be shy to talk with the forest owners, because a lot of forest owners sort of are probably more than willing sort of to understand that, you know, I mean, of what we are talking about. This means sort of protecting sort of a functional forest ecosystem. There are other points that we discussed. One of them is, for example, the language. You know, that we should maybe have consistently a very accurate kind of a language. So in order to avoid this kind of greenwashing that comes from industry. There is another point, and that's academia, which is sort of the problem that we have is that very few who know are actually willing to speak out, because usually forest ecologists are in the same sort of university as foresters. You know, and the foresters are about 100 more than the forest ecologists, so they immediately get hit over the head when they speak out publicly. And I think one good way forward here might be not to criticize those who do not step forward, but to applaud those who step forward. Like, for example, Pia Ibish. Make them the role models for forest ecologists. You know? I mean, that might be sort of a way of doing this. We had this litigation where there was a sort of the overall opinion that it works in some cases and in others not. It's not a general tool. One has to be very precise in using this tool. Another aspect actually is the monitoring, and we did not actually talk about the forest monitoring law, because I think the forest monitoring law is actually not unimportant, because it creates some kind of a transparency, and that's the reason why the forest industry is so heavily against it. But at the same time, sort of the old growth forests are sort of the pearls, you know, in a way, that we should identify and protect. And again, you know, that should be one of the focus